I'm going to ask you something right now, and I need you to be brutally honest with me, because even though the dust has settled, I still wake up in a cold sweat wondering if I went too far. If you came home from the hardest year of your life, a year spent dodging ID and sleeping with your rifle in the dirt halfway across the world, only to find out that the people supposed to be protecting your home had stolen the only thing that mattered to you, what would you do? Would you trust the system that already failed you to fix it? Or would you burn their entire world to the ground to get back what was yours? Because when I stepped off that C-130 transport plane, smelling like stale sweat, jet fuel, and the lingering fear of the sandbox, I didn't get the homecoming banner and the tearful hug from my 7-year-old son Leo that I'd been dreaming about every single night for 12 months. Instead, I got an empty tarmac, a disconnected phone number, and the slow, sickening realization that while I was fighting for my country, my ex-wife and her new boyfriend had been fighting a very different kind of war against me, one where they took my boy and erased me from his life. So, tell me, was I wrong for unleashing absolute hell on them to get him back? Before I tell you how it ended, I have to tell you how it started, back before the deployment, back when things were just strained, instead of catastrophic. My ex-wife, Sarah, and I had been divorced for 2 years, and it hadn't been pretty, but we had a system. I was career military, Army Ranger, and she knew what that meant when she married me. But the life wears on spouses, I get that. The long absences, the missed birthdays, the constant underlying anxiety. We grew apart. When we split, the agreement was 50/50 custody when I was stateside. And when I was deployed, Leo stayed with her, and I got daily video calls and weekly care packages. Leo was my anchor. He was this incredible little dude, obsessed with dinosaurs and building complex Lego structures that took over the entire living room. He had my eyes and his mother's stubborn streak. Every time I left, it broke my heart a little more, but I explained to him that Daddy had a job to do, to keep people safe, and that I always came back. That was our promise. I always come back, Leo man. I'd tell him, doing our secret handshake, and he'd look at me with those big, trusting eyes and say, "I know, Dad. I'll watch the fort." This last deployment, though, was different. It felt cursed from the start. We were sent to a particularly unstable region, the kind of place that doesn't make the evening news, but where the danger is constant and suffocating. The operational tempo was insane. We were running missions back to back, barely sleeping, constantly on edge. The first 3 months went according to plan. I'd get back to the FOB, exhausted and filthy, and scrape together enough bandwidth to video call Leo. Seeing his face, hearing him ramble on about second grade and how he lost a tooth, that was the oxygen I needed to survive the next day. But around month 4, things started to shift with Sarah. She started missing our scheduled call times. At first, it was plausible excuses. Leo had soccer practice late. She got stuck at work. The internet was down at the house. I tried to be understanding. I knew being a single mom when I was away was incredibly tough. But then the excuses got thinner, and her tone changed. She was cold, distant, almost irritated that I was calling. When I did get to talk to Leo, he seemed quiet, subdued. He kept looking off camera like he was being coached or watched. I asked him what was wrong, and he just mumbled, "Nothing, Dad. When are you coming home?" It tore me apart. Then, a new name started popping up in the few conversations we did have. Mark. Mark took us for pizza. Mark bought me this new video game. Sarah said Mark is really smart. I asked Sarah who Mark was, trying to keep the jealousy and worry out of my voice. "He's just a friend from work," she said breezily. It's good for Leo to have a male influence around when you're gone so much. That stung. It was a low blow, and she knew it. By month 6, the communication dwindled to almost nothing. My emails went unanswered. My calls went straight to voicemail. I was losing my mind over there. You can't focus on a mission when you don't know if your kid is okay. I reached out to my parents, but they said Sarah had cut them off too, wouldn't let them see Leo. They were as worried as I was. I went to my CO, explained the situation. He was sympathetic. He's a good man, but there's only so much the Army can do in family court matters from thousands of miles away. He let me use the satellite phone to try and reach her, to try and get answers. Finally, I got a hold of her about 8 months in. It was brief. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? Let me talk to my son." Her voice was ice cold, unrecognizable. "He's not your son anymore," she said. "He has a real father here now. Mark and I are getting married. You chose the Army over us. Just stay away." Then she hung up. I stared at the phone, the satellite delay making the silence stretch into eternity. I thought I knew fear in combat. I thought I knew adrenaline, but nothing compared to the cold, paralyzing terror of that moment. She was trying to replace me. I spent the last 4 months of that deployment in a state of controlled fury. Every mission, every patrol, I focused that rage. I survived because I had to get back. I had to fix this. When my boots finally hit American soil, the reality of what she'd done hit me like a freight train. I drove straight to our old house. It was empty, not just moved out of, but abandoned. There was mail overflowing in the box, mostly final notices. I went to the bank. My savings account, the one I'd been building for Leo's college, the joint account for bills, drained. Every cent. I was standing in the bank lobby, still in my fatigues, holding a slip that said my balance was 0, and I felt like the floor was opening up underneath me. But the money was nothing compared to what I found out next. I went to the county courthouse to file emergency custody paperwork, thinking she'd just run off. The clerk looked up my file, and her face went pale. She turned the monitor so I could see. While I was overseas, getting shot at in a desert, Sarah and this Mark guy had filed for emergency ex parte custody. They claimed I had abandoned Leo. They claimed I was unstable, suffering from severe PTSD, and a danger to the child. They had a lawyer who specialized in this kind of slime. Because I was deployed and couldn't be served the papers, they convinced a judge to grant a default judgment. They had sole custody. They had even filed a petition to terminate my parental rights on the grounds of abandonment, and were trying to get Mark to adopt him. They used my service to my country as the weapon to sever my legal ties to my own son. I walked out of that courthouse, and I threw up in the bushes. I've seen grown men blown apart, but reading those legal documents, seeing the lies laid out in black and white, seeing how easily they had manipulated the system to steal a child from his father, while he was defenseless, it broke something inside me. I felt entirely alone. I was back home, but I was still in a war zone. I hired a private investigator, a buddy of mine named Tony, who used to be military intelligence. I told him to find them. It didn't take him long. They hadn't gone far, just 2 towns over, moving into a flashy new house that I was sure my life savings had helped put a down payment on. Tony also did some digging on Mark. The guy was a walking red flag. 2 prior DUI, a failed business that ended in bankruptcy and allegations of fraud that never quite stuck, and a reputation for being aggressive when he drank. This was the man Sarah decided was a better father figure than me. This was the man living in a house with my 7-year-old son. Tony set up surveillance. He sent me photos. The first time I saw a picture of Leo, taken with a long-range lens as he got off a school bus, I wept. He looked so thin, he wasn't smiling. He was wearing clothes that were too big for him, and he walked with his head down, shoulders hunched. That wasn't my Leo. My Leo was a firecracker, full of energy. This kid looked broken. And then I saw a picture of Mark. He was standing on the porch, smoking a cigarette, yelling at Leo about something. Leo was shrinking away from him. That was it. That was the moment the switch flipped from heartbreak to pure, unfiltered tactical aggression. I knew where they were. I knew what they were doing. I could drive over there right now, kick down the door, and take my son back. I had the training. I had the rage. I could end Mark in about 30 seconds if he tried to stop me. But I also knew that if I did that, I'd be playing right into their hands. They'd painted me as an unstable, violent soldier. If I acted on impulse, I'd prove them right, and I'd end up in prison, and Leo would be left with those monsters forever. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let the red haze take over and gone in swinging, consequences be damned, just to get your child out of that house immediately? Or would you have swallowed that fire, suppressed every instinct in your body, and played the long, agonizing game to beat them the right way? It was the hardest decision of my life, but I chose the long game. I wasn't going to just beat them. I was going to dismantle them. I was going to use every skill the Army taught me: patience, intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and overwhelming force at the deciding moment. I moved into a cheap motel nearby and turned it into my command center. I worked with Tony to build a dossier on Mark that was thicker than a phone book. We found the people he'd defrauded in his last business venture. We found an ex-girl, friend he'd been abusive toward who was willing to talk. We documented his drinking. We got photos of him driving Leo around with an open container in the car. Then we turned to Sarah. Tony found evidence that she was neglecting Leo to cater to Mark. The school records showed Leo's grades had tanked. He was missing days, and the teachers had noted hygiene issues. Sarah was also blowing through my savings on gambling apps and buying expensive gifts for Mark to keep him happy. She was spiraling, and she was taking Leo down with her. It took 2 months, 2 agonizing months of watching my son suffer from a distance while I gathered the ammunition. I hired the best shark of a family lawyer in the state, a woman who hated injustice almost as much as I did. We filed an emergency motion to vacate the previous orders, citing fraud upon the court, and presented a mountain of preliminary evidence to get an immediate hearing. The day of the hearing arrived. I put on my dress blues. I wanted the judge to see exactly who I was. I wanted Sarah to see what she had betrayed. I walked into that courtroom, and the look on Sarah's face when she saw me was worth half the pain of the last year. It was pure, unadulterated terror. She grabbed Mark's arm, and he looked like he wanted to bolt. They thought I was still overseas, or at least wallowing in defeat somewhere. They didn't expect a full frontal assault. Their sleazy lawyer tried to object, tried to stick to the old narrative of the abandoning, unstable PTSD soldier. My lawyer didn't just shut him down, she eviscerated him. She laid it all out. The deployment orders proving I was serving my country, not abandoning my child. The logs of my attempted calls and emails, the evidence of them draining the bank accounts, and then she dropped the hammer on Mark. The Deweys, the fraud, the abuse allegations, the photos of him drunk with my son in the car. You could feel the air leave the room. The judge, an older woman with a stern face, turned a shade of red I've never seen before. She looked from the evidence to Sarah and Mark with absolute disgust. When Sarah tried to speak, to cry and play the victim, the judge silenced her with a gavel bang that sounded like a gunshot. "Mrs. Davies," the judge said, her voice shaking with anger, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated, malicious manipulation of this court system. You used this man's service to hit country as a weapon to steal his child and rob him blind while he was defending yours. It is despicable." The judge vacated all previous orders immediately. She granted me full, sole legal and physical custody of Leo, effective instantly. She issued a restraining order against Mark for both Leo and me. She ordered Sarah to repay every dime she stole, and she referred both Sarah and Mark to the district attorney's office for charges of perjury, fraud, and custodial interference. It was a total victory on paper, but the real battle was just starting. I went with police escort to pick up Leo from his school. When the principal brought him to the office, he stopped in the doorway. He looked so small. He saw the uniform first, and he flinched. Then he looked up at my face. It took a second for him to register it was really me. His lower lips started to tremble. "Dad," he whispered. I dropped to my knees and held out my arms. "I'm home, Leo, man. I'm home for good." He ran to me and buried his face in my neck, sobbing so hard his whole body shook. I just held him, tears streaming down my own face, whispering, "I got you. You're safe. I got you." The aftermath wasn't easy. Leo had been through hell. They had told him I didn't love him anymore, that I had found a new family overseas. It took months of therapy and constant reassurance to undo the damage they did to his little heart. He had nightmares. He wouldn't let me out of his sight. Sarah tried to reach out, tried to apologize when the reality of prison time started looming, but I shut that door firmly. She lost the right to be his mother when she tried to destroy his father. Mark ended up facing felony charges for some of his past business dealings that our investigation brought to light, on top of the charges related to Leo. Last I heard, he was looking at 5 to 10 years. Sarah got hit with fraud charges and is likely facing jail time too. Their little house of cards, built on lies and stolen money, collapsed completely. Leo and I are doing better now. It's just the two of us. We moved to a new town, a fresh start. He's getting his spark back. The Lego towers are taking over the living room again. I got out of the army. I couldn't risk leaving him again. I found a job in logistics that keeps me home every night. It's not the same rush, but tucking my son into bed every night, knowing he's safe, knowing he knows I'm there. That's a better feeling than any mission accomplished. So yeah, that's my story. They took my only son while I was deployed, and I came for them with everything I had. The system is deeply broken that it allowed this to happen in the first place, that a soldier could lose his child because he was doing his duty. But I proved that if you fight smart, if you fight hard, and if you have the truth on your side, you can still win. If you were on my side through this insanity, hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about people fighting back against impossible odds, make sure you subscribe. I really want to know your final thoughts on this whole mess down in the comments. Did Mark and Sarah get what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.